I first learned of Scott Carney as he was writing his 2016 book, What Doesn't Kill Us, the story of Scott being commissioned by Playboy Magazine to write an article debunking the cold water, deep breathing iceman, Wim Hof. Scott went to Wim's training center in Poland. His intention was to get into the depths of Wim's cold water immersion therapy and deep breathing methods to reveal the cracks and fallacies of the practice. And this was Scott's specialty. He was on the heels of his 2015 book, The Enlightenment Trap, then entitled A Death of Diamond Mountain. The book explores the cult-like practices of adaptive, Americanized versions of Eastern religions, how gurus in the U.S. try to capitalize on enlightenment for their own finances and fame. For Scott Carney, a journalist, an anthropologist who lived in India for 6 years, debunking myths is his specialty. So, back to those days at the Wim Hof Training Center in Poland. I can imagine Scott's bullshit detector on high. He immersed himself with other guests who were paying money to learn the Wim Hof method under the direction and guidance of Wim himself. Deep breathing sessions followed by cold water immersions and hiking up the nearby mountain in Poland wearing minimal clothing. Yet during Scott's time with Wim, sitting with Wim on his sauna bench, something unexpected and remarkable took place. Scott became a convert to the practice and the benefits of the Wim Hof method. Not this is interesting type benefit, but some deep, profound improvement in mental clarity, physical endurance, and overall, quote, getting high on his own supply, end quote, as Wim says. Happy, healthy, strong. So, Scott's Playboy assignment morphed into the book, What Doesn't Kill Us. The critic became the convert, and the foreword of the book is written by Wim himself. I started doing the Wim Hof method myself back around that time in 2016. It is such a natural extension to what we love, sauna and then cold plunging. It all just made sense to me. For decades, I would do push-ups on my dock in the morning in my northern Minnesota island lake cabin, and then dive deep into our cold northern Minnesota lake, finding great meditative calm along the bottom of the lake, often just suspended above the bottom, down low in the depths, much as a big fish would do, in no hurry to come to the surface. This was my own Wim Hof method before I heard of Wim Hof. What Doesn't Kill Us treats us to intimate one-on-one connections with Wim, the crazy mastermind with several world records, yet arguably best known for beating back the flu-like effects from being injected with an endotoxin at a research hospital in Holland, all through the power of the mind. Deep breathing exercises that help us control our autonomic nervous system, a feat that up until then medical science insisted could not be possible. What's even more significant is that after the scientists wrote off the feat as Wim being a freak of nature, Wim himself trained a group of people not familiar with his method for only a few days. Then this group was also injected with the endotoxin, and they all beat back the flu symptoms, just like Wim himself had done previously. This study was remarkable. As Wim says, it has changed modern science forever, and you can read more about it in Scott Carney's book. Also, the book ends with Scott hiking Mount Kilimanjaro, the tallest peak in Africa, with Wim and some others. I won't spoil it, except to say that Scott and Wim make it to the top, and it is a crazy adventure, extremely well written and funny. Then I recently heard Scott being interviewed by my friend Mindstrong Harvey on his podcast. Scott is great to listen to. He's got such a depth of knowledge, and he tells a really clear, interesting story to support his knowledge without sounding pedantic or cocky in any way. He is interesting and interested. As a journalist, he is naturally curious. Needless to say, I'd like to hang out more with Scott Carney. Scott is happy to talk about his new book, The Wedge, and in this episode we dive deep into parts of his new book. The wedge, simply defined, is the space between stimulus and response. We sauna lovers know all about the wedge. When we toss water on the rocks and feel that heavy blast of lolu, we don't rush for the sauna door, but we close our eyes and take it in. In Finland, it is polite to shut up during this time. Actually, in Finland, it's probably polite to shut up most times. But when we create a wedge between stimulus, the blast of steam, and response, rushing out of the room, as we know, this is when magic happens. And same for the cool down. When we exit the hot room and immerse ourselves in ice cold water, the conditioned response is to yelp like a cocker spaniel and resist the cold. But we sauna enthusiasts have reprogrammed ourselves to embrace this feeling. We listen to the core, not our skin. Thank you, brain, for telling me to get out of this cold water. Yes, I understand that we, as humans, are conditioned to resist and activate a flight response when we feel ice-cold water. But we are on a different path now. We are embracing this cold as part of this wonderfulness of sauna therapy. Instead of all this chatter, now we have a simple word for this internal monologue, the wedge. We talk about the chapter in his book called Red Line, where he and his wife go to Latvia for a long sauna ritual. And we talk about other examples in the book that help us understand the power of the wedge. Scott is one of us. He owns his own sauna and is often found chilling out between rounds outside his own backyard sauna retreat in Denver, Colorado. If you're like me, you'll be nodding your head up and down, page after page, while reading The Wedge. Scott has a way of saying what we feel and have felt for a long time. When we become under stress is when we are most human. Regarding hot-cold therapy, it is like lifting weights for our vascular system. It's especially nice to hear Scott's impressions of what is most misunderstood about sauna. Often, sauna is viewed as a post-workout routine. A sense of community is what is missing. We don't have to take sauna so seriously. We can have fun with sauna. I am super pleased to bring you this episode of Sauna Talk. Please welcome Scott Carney. This show is brought to you by Nice Mug. Nice Mug is the only mug made entirely out of ice. For more information, go to nicemug.com and enter the coupon code SAUNA for 10% off your entire purchase.
So Scott, good morning. And part of the Zoom thing that I'm kind of coming over to the dark side with is the ability to, cast the net wider in a wider geography and be able to interview people. I mean, I would sure love it if you and I were sitting on your sauna bench or up here in Minnesota, but I want to thank you for coming on board in a virtual setting like we are this morning. So welcome to Sauna Talk.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the issues with actually doing interviews in a sauna is that your equipment starts to melt at some point. I've done some of these, what do you call them, Facebook Live things. I don't know if you know what that is. I've had my phone up, and it lasts about 5 minutes before it's like, yeah, I'm out. I am done.
Scott. Yeah. Well, yeah. On that, from a technology side, I used to bring my MacBook laptop on the floor in the hot room, and I'd have a long mic with a kind of a mid-tech microphone and pass it on the bench back and forth. And then I have this college assistant who's like, why don't you get one of these? And, when you see like sports figures being interviewed by journalists in the locker room, the journalist got one of these little things like the size of two fingers,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I've been using on the sauna bench. And I insulate it with my hand, and then I hold it between guests, and that seems to work out. Yeah, less is more in this technology world,
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to start from many different areas, but I think for you, you know, a great spot to start is the wedge. And you were kind enough to send me an advanced copy, and I'd like to read your inscription if I could for listeners
Sure.
to Sauna Talk. So you write, Glenn, I love what you're doing with Sauna Times. Get hot and get cold, Scott Carney. So
That's right.
yeah, man. So you've written a fair number of these inscriptions for
Hmm.
folks. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So, so this is my, what's in my fourth book. And, I have a pretty broad, wide reach. I've sold lots and lots of books, but there are some people who really are passionate fans. And I think it's really nice to be able to send people sort of personalized inscriptions. So I have been trying my best, and it's actually very difficult to do an individual inscription to every single person who orders a book, because how many ways can you describe the wedge? Apparently, over 100. I'm gonna keep on trying to do that. And it's funny that when it's an interesting challenge for me as a writer to do new inscriptions every time, because I sort of feel like I'm writing a whole new book in like one page, and my terrible handwriting. It's like my handwriting is almost illegible. Inscriptions where I'm trying to sort of like elucidate ideas in new ways. And if I had been smarter, I would have taken pictures of every single
Mhm.
one that I had taken.
Well, maybe you can reach back, Scott. Maybe you can reach back, and I'm honored that you sent me this. And it's a little bit like haiku. I mean, you only have so much space on the page,
Yep.
and you really have to boil down and the essence of your communication. So I wanted to start with that as a personal thank you, because it is a personal touch what you've done there for me.
And also, with this one, get hot and get cold, I think that's a very important sort of root concept in the wedge and in life in general. Is the contrast is so important, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
hot, cold, whether it's fear, joy, whether it's,
Mm-hmm.
flow and unconsciousness, or, whatever it is, like these flipping between different states is really what makes us human. Is it's because it's challenging our biology, it's challenging our minds, and it's pushing us into um, you know, you know, to be comfortable in different sorts of environments. And one of the reasons why saunas are so amazing is that, how often do you hang out at 180-degree heat, right? How often does that happen in your life? And you're in that environment. At first, it's usually very, very pleasant, right? Get in, and you're going for usually a colder area, and then you're in this like 180, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. And then I wear a sauna hat. I don't know if you're a hat wearer, but I wear like an insulating hat on my head. And then, probably about the 20-minute mark, I'm like, wait a minute, I am sweating a lot and I'm having some trouble here. And you have to make a decision. Do I sort of like open the door and let more cold air come in? Do I go out? What do I do? And that decision point is, when humans are under stress, is when we become the most human, because those choices matter. And certainly don't go into the sauna too long, because people have died, right? People have died in saunas. They do it all the time. Um, uh, but there are these sort of inflection points where you have to decide, well, what is dangerous, what is not dangerous, and what am I going to be in this moment? And I think it's a beautiful thing. So after I first did my first real interesting sauna experience in Latvia, and I'm sure we're going to get to this. One of the first things I did is I came back home and I bought a sauna for my backyard, and I'm in it all the time. I was in it just last night.
Right on, same. And during this lockdown period, have you found that you are taking sauna more frequently? And what is your sauna routine in terms of frequencies, time of day, how many cycles, how many rounds, that sort of thing, cool down experience? Give us a quick little preview of that.
Yeah. I usually go in probably sometime between 3 and 7 p.m. Depending on the weather, depending on the day, depending how I'm feeling. But yeah, it's usually in the afternoons. And when I first got it, I was in there all the time. At least once a day for like a month. And I think I bought it in July, June or July. And that was a mistake because I got real dehydrated,
Mm-hmm.
like chronically dehydrated because I didn't compensate with drinking enough water. So nowadays I'm trying to do it about 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where I find my personal sweet spot is. And I'll stay in between 20 minutes at the minimum, at the most like an hour and a half,
Mm-hmm.
all depending on what I'm feeling like on that particular
Right.
day. And often my wife and I will go in together. Occasionally I go in. I'm a little bit more likely to go in on my own. And I'll listen to like a podcast or something, just sort of like chill out. I've got, I got my sauna hat on to insulate the brains. And then we have like essential oils that we put on. We have a whole like shelf full of essential oils. And I've learned that some are really awesome and some are terrible to put
Yeah.
in. And, I find it very relaxing. It's really nice when you've had like a slow cold day. So my earlier book was called What Doesn't Kill Us, which is about the Wim Hof method, about me jumping into ice water and like going from this. Oh, you got that one too, from the
Shit, yeah,
library, no
man.
less. Awesome.
Well, look, I had this and I gave it to a friend of mine. And then when you sent me this, I'm like, holy shit, and I'm going to start with I'm going to start with the pandering here, the Scott Carney pandering moment here. But I
Nice.
so enjoyed this book that I got this from the library again and gave this. I thought I would skim this, for our read or for our visit today, but I ended up basically rereading this one the second
Nice.
time. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but keep going.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So there's 2 types of cold, right? The way I see it, right? There's the fast cold, which is you like from where you are right now, you go into a cold shower or an ice bath and you feel that cold transition very, very quickly. And then there's slow cold. Slow cold is like, it's like 50 degrees and you're not all bundled up and it's sort of a grinding cold. And I find fast cold, like the Wim Hof method is about fast cold. It's about going from warm to cold or like neutral to cold, controlling yourself in that. But you're only in the fast cold for like 5-10 minutes. You don't need to be in there for an hour to get the benefits. It's that quick transition between these 2 states. Slow cold I find grating. Like I understand how it's useful, but the sauna is like the most pleasurable thing ever after like a slow cold day.
And it does something to the mind as well when you're dealing with a slow, cold day, just to know that you have a hot sauna in your own backyard that is waiting for you. I think, it's so much in the wedge, and we'll get to some of the mental aspects, the mind work, including the Wim Hof and all that. But for me, just knowing on a slow, cold day that there's a sauna available to me, the cold doesn't seem
Right.
so penetrable or such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. There's this idea of like there is respite. It's not only respite, but then it's like really hot, right? Then you go from sort of slow cold to like really pleasurable at first for the first like 5 minutes, just awesome. And then, you get to this point where the sauna is a little bit stressful. I mean, it's always easier than a cold ice bath, right? It's always easier than an ice bath. I never really go above 200 in my sauna. Like I feel like that's the upper limit of where I would ever want to go, but it's usually around 180 where I keep it at.
Right on.
And it's they're really, they alleviate depression. That's one of the coolest things. I'm sure you've seen the research by Chuck Raison out of University of Wisconsin, where he correlates depression with an elevated body temperature. So people who are depressed have like basically a light fever, and there's lots of correlations, and I go into that in the wedge quite a bit for why that is. But one of the things that just about every circumpolar indigenous community ever, it doesn't matter what continent you're on, they all have like some type of sweat lodge or sauna tradition, and they're used in part to treat depression because when you have an elevated temperature, if you then blow the roof off that temperature and you bring your body temperature way above, so if you were running at like 100 and now you're running at, I don't know what your body in core goes to, but much higher than that, you actually reset to a lower temperature, a more normal temperature after that. And so it becomes this great way to alleviate depression. And what Raison's research showed was that if you actually just correct someone's body temperature, the depression also goes away. Like if you treated somebody who was depressed with SSRIs, which is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like your Prozacs and whatnot, your Lexapros. If you treat someone with that, then you test their body temperature has reset to normal. And so saunas can do the same thing to a person, which is amazing.
Beautiful. I wanted to backtrack a little bit and get a little geeky with you. So, I've been taking saunas for 30 years. I've been building saunas, and I went back to the Mecca. It was like a pilgrimage back to Finland. And I came back with a couple of really cool learnings I just wanted to share with you as a little digression. When you mentioned that you were sauning like crazy, and you got really like dehydrated and tired and stuff, two thoughts for you. I realized when I was getting tired with sauna, and I was getting a little bit more tired in my backyard sauna in Minneapolis than up at the cabin where I'm at right now. I could take much more aggressive saunas without that post-sauna fatigue. And I was trying to figure it out. And then it went on like a light bulb when I was in Finland. Scott, I took 50 saunas in 12 days in Finland and was escorted around by a lot of pros, a lot of the real like heavy duty sauna people, but they introduced me to minerals, and I'm like, it was like a massive light bulb that went on, because what I realized is I was drinking 2 large 32-ounce Gatorade bottles of water in Minneapolis, and it was from our reverse osmosis system. And I'm like, that takes everything out. So I was like basically drinking non-mineral waters, and I was dehydrating myself, even though I was drinking a shit ton of water. So I offer that as a thought. You can be looking at minerals and stuff.
I use a mineralization solution at the end of my saunas. I have this some sort of like non-sugar based electrolyte thing that I now doctor my water with.
Right on.
Which does seem to be helpful.
Yes.
For certain. But also, I'm up 5280 here, so I'm in Denver, a mile high, and it's just really easy to get dehydrated anyway. Just being in Denver, doesn't matter how much water you drink, you're just dehydrated all the time. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I certainly found my groove now.
Right on. And the other bit I wanted to share real quickly is about ventilation, and I've become a real nut for good ventilation, including the saunas that I'm consulting with and building now. I was taken aback by how counterintuitive good ventilation is to sauna, because you would think normally you want to really contain this heat, hold it down, and build the core. You can do that as your sauna comes up to temperature, but so often it's counterintuitive in that a well-vented sauna actually feels hotter, because it's akin to, say, being on a frozen lake with no wind. You can kind of deal with that. But the slightest breeze and you're like super cold, and it's the opposite in a hot room, where that little bit of circulation makes it feel even hotter. But it really.
Where do you Yeah, there's 2 vents in my sauna. There's one right under the sort of electric coal thing, the heating element, right? And then there's another one in the back of the sauna, and I keep them both wide open. I believe.
Good.
I think that's
right on.
I don't really touch them at all.
Yeah.
I've no idea.
If you want to get nerdy,
something right.
No, you're doing it right. If you want to get nerdy on that, like when you, it's electric, right? You have an electric.
Yeah, it's electric, right? Electric, and then coals on it. It's a Finleo something or other. Yeah.
Got it. So when you flip the switch, try next time just closing the vents, and when you're up to serving temperature, then open the vents. And so you're kind of like getting a good wood-fired pizza oven going, or you're baking bread. In other words, you got a good heat mass that's very dense, and then you open those vents and you'll get good circulation. But anyhow, I didn't mean to geek out on you, but that was something I learned from my trip over there, is basically hydration through minerals and good ventilation allow one to be a sauna madman a little bit better. So
awesome.
Right on. So I want to talk about the wedge, and I just when I read the book, and I think I told you this, I said, like, finally somebody's explained this very simply, because I got to tell you that what I would do when I would bring people into sauna, and you're absolutely right, sitting on the bench is very soothing and therapeutic, but how we choose to cool down is where things can get shocking. And so I would always try to coach people jumping into our cold lake in here in northern Minnesota, or be it an ice bath or a cold shower. I'd say, look, you're feeling one thing, but don't freak out. Like, feeling versus freak out. And it was so parallel that you came up with this from a technical side. And I would like guests to hear it from your voice. The wedge, stimulus, the whole game. I mean, you probably explained this a million times, and I could do it if you want, but you go, if you're cool with it, you go at it.
So the question is, what is the wedge? And the easiest way to think about it is a way that we think of a lot of these meditative practices, which is separating stimulus from response, right? We have the stimulus of the external sort of objective environmental stimulus, whatever that might be. And then there's the way that your nervous system reacts to that. And, we only have two nervous system pathways, really. It's sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. And our bodies really, you can only be in one of those two states at any of the time. And sometimes it's a mix. Usually it's a mixture of the two, right? Rest and digest when you're sleeping is the full on, and fight or flight is when you're actually fighting, you're dumping all that adrenaline and cortisol. But we do have some choice in how our bodies select which pathway that we're going to be going on into. And usually, certain stimulus give you sort of an objective of response. The ice bath, for instance, puts you into fight or flight because it's your body senses it as a threat, as imminent death. It's all of these signals. And so then your body is like, okay, I'm going to rise to the challenge. I'm going to clench up, and I'm going to release all these stress hormones that will let me power through this environment. The thing is, and this is the beauty of the Wim Hof method, is that he says, well, no, that's just your emotions getting in there, right? That's and your emotions are interesting. Like an emotion is like basically your mind, or your brain telling your mind, talking about sort of predicting what the environment's going to do to you in a way. And there's a very technical explanation for this in the book, and I don't know if I want to go all the way in because it's nerdy. But essentially, sensation and emotion get wired together in our brain. And you can say it, you feel an emotion, but you can also sort of think it. And the emotions give us the ability to sort of navigate the world. And if it's just a sensation that comes in, it's just data. But that data doesn't mean anything until your mind sort of ascribes meaning to that. And the way we do that is with emotion. So I have this thing we call neural symbols, and everything that we think about, everything that we feel and even conceive of at like a highly abstract intellectual level comes from the combination of sensation and emotion as like sort of the bits and bytes of consciousness. I think I've described that as in a little confusing way. And I'm sorry about that.
No, you did not at all. And so I'll summarize it in a little. Here's what you've done to me. Like just this morning. So I've done. Mm-hmm. I do Wim Hof every morning, and then I jump in the lake. Mm-hmm. And I tell because the lake is still really cold up here. So I just tell myself, and I've been telling myself this for years, but now I tell myself, just do the wedge, right? So I used to tell myself, mm-hmm. Oh. Hey, I know that this feeling is cold, but just think how great it's going to be when you get off the ladder and stand on the dock. So it's mm-hmm. sort of that you can trick your mind, much as you said. It's a repositioning. Right. So you don't think about that sensation. You think about how damn good it feels after, and
Sure.
we all know that. With the endorphins rushing.
And you also try not to fight it, right? Because there's mm-hmm. no one who's ever died in a minute in an ice bath. Like 1 minute in the ice bath, even 10 minutes, honestly, it's not going to kill you. No matter, because honestly, water, if it's liquid, is over 32 degrees. Like we know this, right? That's the nature of water. And you can only lose so much heat into that water. And while your body has this emotional response to be like, no, we're dying, you can tell your body, and this is what the wedge is. It's you tell your body, no, you're wrong. It's not something we need to be scared of. And you can do that by thinking how awesome it is or how awesome it makes you feel. But essentially, you push yourself from that clenching fight or flight into that relaxed state. And the miracle is your body's like, okay, well, I'll find a different way to heat myself. Like, I'm not just going to give up, right? I'm not going to just like, let all the cards go and just, flop around and die. What I'm going to do is, essentially you start burning white fat, like you go to a metabolic program and, it's really cool. And you can read all, what doesn't kill us. And I can talk about the chemistry in that, but essentially you've also switched your emotional state, and you've switched your emotional state in a stressful situation. And that, that gives you these generalized benefits in life, over every aspect of it. Because if you can put yourself in a stressful situation and then say, this isn't that bad, that alters your body, because your body went from fight or flight, stressful situation means fight or flight, to actually now rest and digest, which changes the hormones that you're releasing. Fight or flight's adrenaline and cortisol, and rest and digest is like ghrelin, and actually I'm not even sure what's on rest and digest, but it's a whole bunch of different sets of hormones. And then, so literally that thought changes your interior chemistry. It changes your interior biology. All the cells that you have in you, all the bacteria that's living in your gut, all of that stuff is now responding to a different set of stimulus that you've generated with your mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. It reminds me also, like, if you, sauna and hot and cold are just such a great way to train the mind. So where I'm going with that is, you have a group of people that are very well conditioned to hot and cold, say, and then something stressful happens, a car accident or some other thing. I can tell this from a personal standpoint. I'm less apt to freak out, because I immediately go into a very comfortable place to say, okay, stimulus, I get it, something's freaking out, but I pause. And there's a gap there that you've explained so eloquently. So it is a cognitive thing that you can apply to other areas of life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's not to say it makes you superhuman, right? I mean, you got in your car accident, you had a clear mind, you still had the car accident, right? So, this isn't like magic, but what it does do is it can give you a tool to give yourself clarity in a moment. And alternately, the other thing that you can do, I talk about inserting a wedge a lot in the book. And what I didn't explicitly say in a sentence, and I'm sort of kicking myself for not doing this, but you can also remove a wedge, right? You can be like, okay, actually, I want to be automatic right now. I want to go with exactly what my body wants to do. I don't want to question it, because sometimes your body's right, and so you can sort of decide to give it those things. So you're not questioning yourself. So you're not using that gap, which is also a time gap, right? Because sometimes the mind gets in the way. And this is when we get into flow state. So I have this whole chapter about throwing kettlebells back and forth between people. And I didn't explicitly say it, but that is removing the wedge, because I want your body to act automatically in stress, so that you just sort of go into flow. And that's I still kick myself for not putting that one sentence in the book, but
well is right. Well, there's a so Scott, I'm teeing the ball up for you potentially for the follow-up book about when so the point is when, by consciousness, by being able to understand the wedge, you can control the wedge, how much you want to put in or how little you want. But it's about learning a language, it may be about when it's time to apply and when to accept.
Yeah. I mean, it's the stress and emotion and sensation. These are the grammar of our neurology, right? It's not the grammar of your mind. Your mind has usually I think in English generally, but you also feel emotions and stuff. And so the wedge is the tool that we use to surf this sort of like structure of the brain and the knowledge of that structure, these feelings. Even when you say feeling, right? I say, I have this, I'm feeling angry, right? We say this, right? Or I'm feeling love or whatever. It's interesting to know that we use that word, because that's also the word we use to say, I feel cold, I feel hot. And so there's this connection, even linguistically, that we have between an emotion and just a sensation of the environment. And I think it was a very wise thing that happened, however English got formed. And likely, I also speak Hindi, and we can get into that later. But also, lagna is also the same thing. It's a feeling of an emotion, but also I can feel cold. So there's some sort of like root out there about and what is it in Lo Siento? Is that in Spanish too? Now I'm going to go through all the languages I barely know and try to figure out if this is sort of like a universal concept, is that feelings of sensations and feelings of the interior state are somehow connected at the root of our being and culture.
So we got to get into Wim. We got to talk Wim. When the book came out, I was probably, I don't know, maybe 8 months into my own Wim practice through the 10-week course and stuff. So it's just so great to see. I mean, you are on the forefront of his work. You, before the book, What Doesn't Kill Us came out, you had been doing the Wim Hof for about how long? Like when, 2016?
2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been doing it since 2011. When I first met him in Poland, I was the first journalist to take him seriously. Initially I was on a commission from Playboy to debunk him as a charlatan, because I'd just written another book. It was called The Enlightenment Trap, and it was about how meditation can kill you, essentially. And if people who get so caught up in the idea of superpowers and like spiritual explanations for rational events that they go crazy and bad things happen. And when I saw Wim, he's this dude sitting on an iceberg saying he can control his immune system and do these what looked like sort of crazy things. I went out there, I was like, cool, this guy's gonna get people hurt, and I'm going to go debunk him before he gets famous. Lo and behold, his method works. My whole plan falls apart, and I am one of the very first people to help sort of make Wim famous. I mean, he did it. He's amazing on his own.
Right.
But I was sort of one of the first people in there sort of talking about the benefits of this method. And since then he's grown into sort of a global superstar. And it's interesting though, I sort of need to put this out there now. So I wrote What Doesn't Kill Us. It came out in 2017. And Wim was already getting to the point of sort of like global superstardom at that point. And I think one of the messages in What Doesn't Kill Us, which I think comes out pretty well, is that Wim is a madman, right? He is crazy and way out there, and he does things that are irresponsible and nonsense all the time. And at the same time as that, he's also a prophet. Like, he has shown this door to something in your body that you can really take something valuable away from. So, this madman prophet duality is like sort of central to What Doesn't Kill Us. But I want to raise this point, is that since this book came out, since Wim has sort of like, sort of been on all the podcasts and sort of become more and more famous, he's on, Netflix shows with Gwyneth Paltrow and whatnot. I think a lot of people are looking at him as a prophet, right? Without that madman duality. And I think that's actually dangerous. And I think it's really bad for Wim as a person too, because he's getting isolated and people now sort of take his word as gospel. And, he's still a madman, right? He'll still, if you followed everything that Wim said, you're definitely going to die. Right. There's no doubt.
Right. Yeah. A couple quick things to interject on that. And I agree. Like, I think he's taken a little back seat to the breathe motherfucker line. He's had to soften his thing a little bit. And that was, that line that he would use was really a spirit of his madmanship, of unpretentious, free-spirited. I'm not out to be the prophet. Motherfucker, just breathe, right? So he's it's unfortunate, he's had to do this. He's had to conform a little bit, but his message is still so true, and the breathing works so great. Now, one more bit on the madman, and I was literally laughing last night in bed, and my wife turns to me, Julie, she said, "What's so funny? What's so funny?" And I couldn't get her started, but I was revisiting What Doesn't Kill Us, and I would love for you to take us back to the hike in Mount Kilimanjaro, and damn it if I can't find it, but the page, I wanted to almost read it or have you read it, but it was exactly what you were saying, where it was like the final hurrah, and you're like sitting there, and it's like, should I stay back? And Wim goes darting off, and then there you are, and he says, you're saying to yourself, what am I doing following the steps of this madman, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's basically the plot here is, we're climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro. The idea is to do it fast, right? And, I'm in basically a bathing suit this time. Wim has like a t-shirt and he has like a blanket over his back, and like bird shorts, as they were called, bright
That's right.
orange shoes. These are all floating into my brain right now. And he basically, a lot of people said it is dangerous, right? It's dangerous to go as fast as we were doing, and because of altitude sickness. And so we're using his breathing method to sort of counteract the dangers of altitude sickness. And we've made it up to the final ascent. I think we're at a place called Kibo Hut, and we're gonna go, and then it's like you've sort of gone off this like sort of mild incline, and then you get to Kibo, and it's like boom, you're going right up the cone of the volcano at that point. And it's like you go from like sort of like dirt and plains and sort of like loose and like sort of tight volcanic soil to basically you're climbing off rubble for a long ways. I don't know exactly how long, but it's like straight up rubble. And Wim is looking at his watch. He's like, oh, we got to get there before 30 hours is over. We got to beat the record. And I'm not even sure what record he's talking about, but he's like, there's a record. We got to beat it. So, and he makes us skip lunch, which you have to understand. Like, it's not just like you skip lunch today. Like, it's like you're skipping the fuel. You're not gassing up your car in the race, and you're doing it in a place where if you fell unconscious, right, or if you bonked out, you're gonna die of altitude sickness. Like, this is a dangerous thing to skip lunch on the final ascent.
And at
he's
that
like, no,
moment,
we're doing it.
At that moment, you said he turns bright red or something like that. When he makes this decision, okay, we're gonna go now.
Yeah.
He gets
He's
all like
angry.
angry.
Yeah.
Right. He gets fired up.
He's angry. He's calling people, names. Like, the worst parts of his personality sort of come out. And he goes up, and I think some, like one or two people follow him, right? And like our guides are like, no, you can't go. You're gonna die. Like, this is dangerous. And these are the guides who climb up there all the time. And so there's this mutiny, and the entire group more or less stays behind. And we're like 20-ish people. I'm like, no, let's finish lunch and we'll go. And he's going up, and I'm like, oh man, I got a book to write. And I'm looking at him walk up the mountain. I'm like, fuck. All right. I'll follow him, but I'm pissed, right? And so I put on all of my clothes, like I've been basically bare chested this whole time. But then I like pile on, like I look like the State Puff Marshmallow Man. I've got like the puffy on, and I put my wind pants on, and I follow him, and we have this fight. He's yelling down, and he's like, Scott, don't you what was it like? Don't you challenge me? And I'm like, Wim, you're an idiot,
Right.
And we go up, and eventually it's me, one other dude, and Wim, and we're going up the mountain, and I'm sort of angry, and Wim is angry, and the other guy's like a true believer. He's like, I will follow Wim anywhere, which is also scary in its own way, right? So we're going up the mountain, and I see him slip. Right. This is like the moment where I see him, like, Wim is this guy that I've been following for a long time. I really respect him. I'm also a little skeptical of him, but I see him slip, and I'm like, wait a minute, this guy is just as fallible as all of us. And like, he's not a man who has no limits in nature, which I knew intellectually, but here's this tangible moment in front of me. And I'm like, so what the fuck am I doing? and I realized that the reason I'm on this mountain, the reason I'm doing this challenge, is not really about Wim. Wim opened the door, but it's about my climbing the mountain for me, right? And for Wim, it should be about him, and the dentist, the guy I'm with, is for him. And it's all our own journeys, and it's really about our relationship with the environment. It's not the relationship with Wim. And I guess a more rational person would have been like, all right, Wim, you can go up, and I'll just walk up in my own time. But I didn't do that. I stayed with him, and I took off my shirt. I couldn't get the wind pants off because the hiking boots were sort of too thick and whatever. But and then I felt like, okay, this is my journey, and I have limits, and I know where my limits are, and there's places where I'm sort of falling down and whatnot. But there was this connection I had where it was with the environment. It was about the conversation that I was having with that wind on my skin. It was that conversation I was having with that sensation of cold on my skin. And it wasn't about thinking about the ideology of the Wim Hof method or anything. It was about the language that I'm having with the environment. And this is where the wedge is really, really important. I was like, I get to navigate that right? I get to navigate my own sensations. It's not someone else telling me how to navigate my sensations. It's me. And this is the core of the wedge. This is the core of the book, is because all sensation, by definition, is subjective, right? And the only objective thing to consciousness is that everyone has their own consciousness, and it's a totally subjective experience, and yet it's interdependent. Like my consciousness depends on my conversations with you and my education and my mother and my dad and my family and all that stuff. Like all of that impacts the consciousness, but the sensations are the subjective feeling, and those subjective feelings actually change the way our biologies work. So in the wedge, I'm putting myself in different stimuli that are very hard usually, and then I'm controlling myself in that stimuli, and it makes, and I find that I'm quite resilient in different things. But the book is also not a recipe. Like you do these 10 wedges and you're going to be awesome. Like Scott's awesome. I'm not that awesome. But like, you become this awesome person. That's not what it is. It's to say, look, you respond in stress in different ways. And the stresses that you need might be different than the stresses that I need. The ones that call to you might be different than the ones that call to me. And that's A-okay. Go find your own wedges, but be conscious that you need to push. You need to find the things where that are difficult. So you push up against them and touch them and play with them and use that to become even better.
There's another element to you in these moments also as a journalist, and I just wanted you to share with listeners how you do this. Like when, for example, back to Kilimanjaro, when you go chasing after Wim under this extreme stress, let's just back up on that just to let us know it's really, you're doing the Wim Hof method. You're doing like 30 breaths. You're tricking this altitude problem by a ton of Wim Hof breathing to get you through. And that's where all the guides are saying this is impossible and don't do it. And so you have this on your mind. You have to be consciously deep breathing. You're in a very stressful spot where you're hiking up the tallest mountain in Africa. On top of all that, unlike these other 20 people that you were on this journey with, you have to remember all this stuff. And I have to pander to you because it's just so well written. The story of you chasing after Wim and the whole Kilimanjaro element is just so well written. How do you do that? How do you layer on top of all of this stress on your body, which is affecting your mind? How do you put yourself in a place to remember what you've experienced so that you could put it down on paper?
I mean, I've been a journalist for 10 years, so there's an element of observing as you're going up. As I recall, when I was going up, I journaled a little bit, I think. I have the journal right next to me over here. I think I took some basic notes, like, remember this. And it would be like one line, like Wim slips or whatever, right?
Right,
and,
okay.
it was not like super detailed at that point. But then with that chapter, basically I came down the mountain and we were in some hotel. I don't remember what it was called. And while everyone else was, I think they went on a safari. There were 20 people in the group. I think they saw elephants and rhinos and stuff, which would have been cool. But instead, I just sat down, and that whole chapter I wrote in probably 8 hours. And it's like a 30-page chapter because I just was like, I'm going to write this right now. And I'm going to write it chronologically. I'm just going to go A, B to C. Right. And we're going to do the whole thing really quickly. Because if you don't get that, details will slip. Writing is a weird process. Like, I don't even know, like, sometimes I know I have like a system, I'll do 500 words a day, but sometimes you just sort of vomit it out on the page and it's perfect. You're like, okay, I didn't have to edit that. It just is right there. And the Wim Hof, that final chapter was just sort of like the vomit onto the page and it appeared and you're like, cool, there it is. All right. Send that out to the printers.
Right. And what a great way to finish the book, because it was the culmination of that relationship at the time.
And it's actually the same way for the last chapter in the wedge too, where I'm also building. I mean, there's also this narrative idea that you need to have an arc in your book. You start off one place and you end up in another. And so having a big challenge at the end of a book is a smart idea from a narrative perspective, right? Because the reader's like, well, where are we going now? If I started with Kilimanjaro, they're like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, right. Well, you tease them with the Kilimanjaro, and then to be blunt, I had forgotten. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't get to the really the candy, like and then the candy's at the end. Now I get to
Yeah.
go with Scott Carney up the mountain with Wim. Yeah. So let's get over to the wedge and spirit of your time and folks listening to this episode of Sauna Talk. I want to just nerd out with you on three areas, three excerpts from the book, if we can do that. On page 179, you speak about the metaphor of wolves patrolling the area inside our bodies. Can you touch upon that? I found that really beautiful.
So I'm talking about the immune system here, because there is a really amazing immune benefit to things like the Wim Hof method, to things like saunas, and anything that you're putting yourself under stress. Which is, if you think about the immune system as metaphorically as wolves that are working for you, right? Because you have these various cells, macrophages, neutrophils, whatever, but basically their job is to run around and look for the things that are attacking you, viruses, bacteria, cancer cells, things that are like off, and then they go eat them. Macrophage actually literally means big eater in Greek, Latin. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I don't know. I think it's probably Latin. So it eats, it's the big eater. It goes and eats the bad things. And so there are millions. There's millions of them. They're running around your body, and the problem one of the problems in the modern world is that we have seen a crazy increase in autoimmune illnesses, right? Where your immune cells, these wolves, are not eating the bacteria and the viruses, or maybe they've finished the bacteria and the viruses, and they're eating you instead. And that's essentially, in my very metaphorical way, is what an autoimmune illness is. Whether it's, I used to get canker sores, which are just sort of mouth ulcers, big white painful ulcers, Crohn's disease, which is basically canker sores in your intestines, but worse, lupus, arthritis, you name it. Autoimmune illnesses are booming right now. And it's really probably the first time in a history that it's such an epidemic level of autoimmunity issues. One of the reasons for this is a very clean environment. We live very hygienically. And so those wolves don't have as much stuff to eat, right? So what happens when wolves are around there running, without things to eat, they get bored and they start chewing on you. The other issue is that when we stress out about the world, right? When we think about our 401k is declining, when we think about the social pressures of the COVID quarantine or whatever, we have these existential problems that we stress out about. And what stress is, what we evolved to do is to dump stress hormones to direct physical threats. A wolf is charging at you. So let's not use a wolf. A lion is charging at you on the plains of Africa. You grab your spear. You dump adrenaline for energy. You dump cortisol to lower your pain threshold, and you either run or stab that lion and survive. That this is what we do. But in the modern world, we're using that same archaic system to deal with COVID. And so we dump adrenaline, dump cortisol, but we don't have a physical output. And we can't stab that lion. We're not doing any of that energy, but all of our cells, which are now bathed in adrenaline, which are bathed in cortisol and whatnot, are responding to that. And so you just hopped up these wolves, macrophages, on adrenaline, and they're going to start eating things. They're going to start eating you because you're not giving them anything else to do. So what I'm saying is that things like saunas, things like the Wim Hof method, various things that I do in my book, it's like giving wolves chew toys. It's just something for them to do. It's okay. You're stressing out about COVID. Now jump in your sauna, and now you have a physical response that sort of placates this pack of wolves in your body.
Beautiful. Thank you. Page 150. You talk about a gentle seesaw between hot and cold. It exercises the autonomic process. It creates an overall resilience.
So I think what I'm talking about here is contrast, right? Is that going from hot to cold triggers things in your body autonomically that you don't really have conscious control over. Like, we have this, your arterial system has muscles in it, for instance, right? If you look at your hand, if you put your hand in ice water, your hand will get white because the muscles in your arteries have contracted and are shunting blood to your core. And this is a survival mechanism that we all have, right? And the only way to trigger that, really, there might be some meditative way that you can think it closed, but really the only way to do it is to throw your hand into cold water and watch that thing occur. Now, when we live in an environment where we are generally static at 72 degrees, summer or winter, right? We don't have that dynamism in our extremities and in our arterial system. So what environmental conditioning does is it's basically like lifting weights for your vascular system, right? You go to hot and you vasodilate, which means you relax, means those muscles relax. You jump into cold, you vasoconstrict, which means they all flex. And that makes your arterial system stronger because it's just, moving the stuff that you can't do in a gym, right? You can have a guy with a six pack and like really big muscles and whatever, but if he only exercises in heated gyms in ways where he's always comfortable or she's always comfortable, that arterial system never gets exercise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. Number 3, page 161. The wedge is our ability to surf that sensation, redirect our attention away from difficult sensations. Beautiful. Again, another metaphor about I love that the idea of surfing through that, the wedge.
Yeah. I'd like to know what the context is around that line. But,
I'm putting you totally on the spot with those, aren't I? These little actions out of the book. All right,
it's
now,
like 80,000 words. I'm like, what the hell was I talking about?
Well, it's you want to speak, or I'll just put it in the context.
No, well, I mean, what we're doing with sensations is we're deciding how to use them, right? Because they come in like a flood, right? Because your peripheral system, where your brain is in a float tank, right, in your head. It's bathing in spinal fluid and it's just hanging out in your head. And the only way it knows anything about the world is your sensory system sending stuff in through your nerves up through your spinal cord and into the lowest levels of the brain. And eyes actually going in a different route. But anyway, it has to come in through the peripheral nerves. And when that comes in, I don't know where the mind is, right? I know where the brain is. I don't know where the mind is. Like part of it is certainly in the brain, but it's could be in other places as well. And this comes in and what the mind is sort of deciding what sensation means, right? And if it's coming in like a torrent, you can get, like, if it was a wave, right, you could get battered by it and just let it just take you wherever it goes. And that can be pleasant, that can be really unpleasant. Or you can try to, as best you can, take control of those sensations and have your mind use them. And that's one way to describe the wedge.
Perfect. And that surfing metaphor was in the chapter Red Line, which I'd love for you to speak with. We're getting to that. And Red Line is about hot and cold and about your experience with sauna. And I'll just tee the ball up for you about the Pertniks, is that what they're called? The Pertniks?
Pertniks or something like that, yeah.
And this wonderful magic that they were able to do through sensations of essences and the Venix, the treatment that you received about contributing to the wedge. So I'm teeing that up for you. Go ahead.
What they were doing, so I went to Latvia, and they have a very elaborate sauna tradition, not unlike Finland. And there was this group of people, Pirtniks, which actually just means guy who owns a sauna, I believe, in Latvia. But they considered them themselves shamans. They have this training around it. And what they were doing was essentially using sensory contrasts, whether it's hot and cold, whether it's confusion and whatever the opposite of confusion, certainty, whether it's contrasting strong smells, whether it was hitting you with branches of random stuff. And they're using all of these very strong sensations and then mixing them together while you are under heat stress. And I have different words for what they were doing, but it's essentially like misdirecting your sensory systems. So the ritual started out, we were eating like a weird bread, like a weird but familiar bread made out of like grains, but also pine needles, right? So it's not a bread that you're normally going to eat, but you try this thing. It's weird, right? I ate pine needles. Okay, cool. And you have this weird smell. And then you're in the sauna and they're hitting you with branches of like pine leaves, right? Or, the fronds of pine leaves. So you're experiencing pine in 2 different ways, 3 different ways, actually. 1 as the taste, 2 as the sensation of the branch hitting you, and 3 is the sound. Now, this is while you're at like 180 degrees or more in the sauna. And as this happens, you're like, well, like the pine is sort of an objective thing. Like if you look at a pine tree, you can experience it by seeing it, you can hearing it, smelling it, you have all these things. And what my brain was doing under stress was mixing those sensations so that I started smelling sounds, hearing sights, feeling the pressure as in different ways. And my sensory system actually gets more dynamic, you could say confused, but also dynamic. And what a neuroscientist will call synesthesia, which is the blending of senses into this new way. So it's a different way to experience things. And the reason why that's important is this sort of biology behind neural symbols, is that sensation and emotion bond together in who we are and how we make conscious things happen. So if you're seeing a sound, right, that's an entirely novel sensation. So whatever emotion you're bringing to that is entirely new. You create this new neural symbol in your brain. And I felt very refreshed and sort of amazing after I left that 5-hour sauna, right? It was a 5-hour tradition, which is a very long time to be at 180 degrees. I mean, we did do some contrasting cold therapy, in and out, but it was what should have been a very stressful, difficult, exhausting experience ended up as a rejuvenating one.
What I got out of that part was very reassuring for me, because what I brought back from my time in north of Europe was how great sauna is as a verb and a noun, meaning it's a great thing to do, but it's also a great place. And what the Europeans, the Northern Europeans, the Finns specifically, are able to do, and the Latvians are creating a space of comfort and relaxation. And so, you speak about like the essences, the essential oils on the rocks or whatever, giving these sensations, and I kind of joke that a cold beer is also a wedge, because when you're, doing the hot and the cold, it doesn't have to be so clinical and scientific. Laughter is a wedge. The relaxation.
And
these are all elements that make for just something so enjoyable and therapeutic by extension.
Yeah, anything you feel is the potential for a wedge, right? The easiest example that I talk about is like, you feel a sneeze coming on and you can decide whether you want to sneeze or not sneeze. That's the wedge too. I don't know if it's useful, right? I like sneezing, but you have that control. And everything you feel is a time to practice this, and it makes you more and more human. You don't have to do it all the time, right? And there's no obligation to put everything under conscious control, but we have the ability to put a lot under there if we want to. And if not, the body's also pretty smart, right? It can sort of just work on its own. Right. And that's, it's being alive is amazing. What a great journey we have. And keep doing things that make you feel more alive until you die, and then you're done.
Then you're done. So creating a great sauna vibe in your own backyard is a wonderful place, because it is a big wedge. You're creating this environment to interpret stimuli even better. So hats off on that. Real quick, couple more. There's 2 other little areas. You okay on time? We got a couple more minutes.
Gotta sort of go pretty soon, unfortunately.
Okay, I'll make this one quick. So I wanted to ask, are you still doing Wim Hof pretty regularly?
Yeah, every morning. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. Same.
I do the breathing every morning. I take a hot shower and I finish cold. Like, where I am in Denver, it's actually a little difficult to get access to. Ice baths are a pain in the butt to put together. And so I don't do it regularly because I don't want to buy ice every 5 minutes.
Totally.
But I do cold showers And if I had an ice cold lake like you do, yeah, I'd be in it all the time. It's just,
Right on.
being around environments where you can opportunistically take advantage of it's important.
Yeah.
But
So we'll finish. Yep, we'll finish on two things. The first is just some nuts and bolts advice for someone who's been doing the Wim Hof method for what, 10 years now?
mhm,
About that. Um,
about that, yeah.
what would you advise for somebody who's been practicing for a while, but they're having trouble kind of with the extension. In other words, they may be only able to hold their breath on retention for like a minute or so. You're kind of this person that seems to relish stress. You find you're doing all these extreme events and stuff. What do you tell yourself at that moment when you feel this need to breathe?
Well, it's funny. I think one of the problems with the way the Wim Hof method is taught is this application that they have going with it. And when you first learn the Wim Hof method, is you're like, oh my God, I'm holding my breath for a really long period of time. You have a stopwatch in front of you. You're like, oh my God, I made it to 2 minutes. Can I make it to 3? And you're looking at this watch, and you're like, oh, I did it. And you're stressing out, like you're pushing yourself. I think, and then I get this question a lot, like, well, how do I go longer? Like, how do I push myself even farther? And my answer is universally, drop the fucking watch. Like, there's no point to have the watch define for you what success is or not. Like, I do the Wim Hof breathing every morning, and I have no idea what my retentions are. I might only be at a minute for all I know. I mean, but maybe I'm at 5. Somewhere between, probably. And the point is not to, you don't hold your breath to become a better breath holder, right? We're not free divers. And in fact, the caveat should be never do the Wim Hof method to dive, because you'll die. 5 people have died or 7 people have died doing this, because it'll give you a shallow water blackout. There is a way to free dive, and you should go talk to a free diver. We're doing the Wim Hof breathing and the retention in order to push against different stresses. And there's 3 important stresses. The first one is the heavy breathing. At first is panic, right? It's your body is simulating a panic attack or heavy exertion or intense joy, but it's like highly sympathetic fight or flight responses. And you're pushing against controlling yourself in that. And it's actually not that hard to do. You breathe heavy, and then you exhale, and then you hold. And at first, it's just sympathetic. It's just parasympathetic. It's just rest and digest. It's very easy. It's actually awesome in the first 30 seconds or so of the breath hold, and you're trying to stay in that parasympathetic setting. And then as the CO2 levels build up in your lungs, you start feeling anxiety, and anxiety translates into the urge to breathe. And so what you're pushing against in this place is you're pushing against the feeling of switching out of parasympathetic. So you're pushing against that. You're trying to say, no, I'm going to stay relaxed. I'm going to stay relaxed. I'm going to stay relaxed. And then there's a switch at some point where you're like, okay, now I'm not relaxed. Now I'm fighting the urge to breathe. And so now you're flipped back into sympathetic tone. And so we're just trying to train those 3 different places to be. And it has nothing to do with time. Like,
Beautiful.
Get into your body, and when you're in that rest and digest phase, go into your vision, right? Close your eyes and go into whatever you're seeing. Go deep and try to surf that and distract yourself from the fact that there's this anxiety coming in. And eventually you're going to be in that anxious phase, and then push against that as long as you feel you need to. And then let go. Like, I'm not a Nazi about this. Like, if you can't hold your breath for 2 minutes, I don't care. Did you have a good experience at the end?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Couple quick questions. Back to sauna. As you think about a day when you're going to sauna, from the anticipation of to, the flipping of the switch, the first round, that first feeling of heat, that first lolu, which is the water throwing on the rocks, the first cool down, all the way through the end. Is there a moment that sticks out, even when you tuck yourself into bed at night after a good long sauna session? If you had to distill it to one moment, what's your favorite through that whole sauna process?
Oh, walking in initially. Oh my God, that's like opening the door and going from slow cold into fast heat is the best feeling. And that's what I love more than anything. Because, you know, it's the most pleasurable. It's the straight up most warm and welcoming place. And that's for sure. The other thing that's very nice about saunas is that if you're there with another person, you're both you're both feeling that same pleasure when you first get in. So that sets everything up as a positive feeling, right? And
Beautiful.
the emotion you've set up is positive. And then you start talking and you start rapping about whatever it is you're talking, or maybe you're quiet, I don't know. But then you're also undergoing that stress together. And so it's a communal experience. And you can have actually very, very deep personal connections in a sauna. And I think that's really beautiful as well.
If
And
you
then you
could
start talking nonsense. Like if you're there too long, you're like, I don't want to talk about it anymore, man. We should probably get out or we're going to die. And then
well, Scott, actually, when you say that, that's actually the origins of sauna talk with a few of my buddies. We're like, sauna talk is a different kind of talk. It can get like the very conceptual, crazy talk, almost like drunk talk in a way. And then, you know, I'll be taking all these notes, and you even saw some of the notes I took about the wedge. And you get all these weird, these crazy associations, like you're on drugs or a night out partying. And then, you know, I'll look at my notes the next day and I'm like, whoa, where was I going with all that stuff? But ultimately, sometimes they're pretty insightful.
Yeah, you know, Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese had a podcast called Truth Barrel for a while because they have a sauna in their backyard. It's one of those barrel saunas, and yeah, and you know they're doing all their XPT awesome work, and then but they would actually do the podcast in the sauna where people would get loopy and say interesting things.
Right on. If you could sauna with anybody in the world, dead or alive, past, present, who's the first person that comes to mind for you?
It's such a hard question. You know, what is the goal with that? Like, are you trying to get somebody to open up? Are you trying to teach them a lesson? Are you trying to get a lesson? You know, I just want to be open with interesting people. I want to have cool connections, and it doesn't really matter how famous they are or whatever. It doesn't need to be Jesus or Donald Trump, right? It doesn't need to be, you know. Yeah, if someone who's open to it and someone who's interested, you know, there's no you know, it's the same question. If you could have a conversation with anyone living or dead, who would it be? Like, I don't know, man.
That right.
Like,
perfect.
It'd be cool. It'd be cool to meet Neil Armstrong. You know, I know he's dead now, but it would have been cool to meet him.
Beautiful.
Is he dead? I don't know if he's dead.
Well, we could get him in the sauna, maybe. But it's a conceptual question. So thank you for that. Cool, interesting people. Could not agree more. How about this one? Two more quick ones. I promise to be done in 1 minute here. If you could bring a mobile sauna anywhere in the world and enjoy sauna, is there a spot that comes to mind in your travels? You're a well-traveled guy.
Anywhere where there's a nice cold bit of water next door. I mean, the beauty of the sauna is that it's the contrast. So I want to be able to go from hot into cold, and I love oceans. Like, you know, and I like oceans more than lakes. I'm gonna make a statement here. Oceans.
Right
so
on.
It would be on the coast somewhere.
Yeah. So sauna is becoming a much bigger deal in America. What do you think is most misunderstood about sauna? I mean, you've experienced in Latvia in your travels. Wim has one in Poland at the training center that you've experienced. So you have one in your backyard. You're no stranger to sauna. As you talk with other people, you know, you have this book, this chapter in the book about authentic sauna, the real deal. What do you think is most misunderstood about sauna?
Oh, you know, it's the sense of community is what's missing in it. Like in America, it's about recovery, right? We're biohacking in the sauna. We have a goal, and I don't think a sauna needs a goal. I don't think we need to take it so seriously in the sense that there's going to be a definite output where I am better at the end of it, you know, and it's like, you know, sore muscles and you go to a sauna. It's like, that's not the goal for me. It's like it's to have the experience. And I think that's changing a little bit here with, you know, with what you're doing, with what Laird's doing, with what I'm doing. I think there's sort of this more holistic understanding. But if you go to Finland, if you go to Latvia, it's about community. It's not about heat.
Yeah. Thank you. A beautiful spot to finish. It's so great. It's so great, Scott, to have you on Sauna Talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just can't recommend these two books enough, and I'm looking forward to reading. I'm going in reverse chronology. Actually, I got through this one first because of our connection with Wim, and he's been a guest on Sauna Talk.
Great.
Yeah, how about his sauna in Poland? Sauna's a big part of Wim's life. I mean, he speaks about it when I interviewed him and we were together. It is the yin and the yang, the hot and the cold, but great books. You are just either we are kindred spirits and or you are a great writer, because I couldn't put these down. And I think I told you this when you sent me the wedge. It's like sauna for me. Like during this COVID time, I could sauna every day, but I love it so much I kind of hold back a little bit, and I sort of have fallen into a great routine of sauna every other day. And this is how it was when I was gifted the wedge from you. It's like, oh my God, this is so good. And I would force myself to put it down, because I could have easily blown through this in one quick read, but I wanted to do it the best justice. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I love that what you're doing too. You know, anything we can do to bring this message out, that's the most important thing.
Right on, brother. And I hope to see you in person soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cheers.